Hello everyone, and welcome to Learn Well, a podcast powered by New Wellness Education. Today is the third episode of the podcast, and I'm gonna be your host for today. I am Tony, I'm 31 years old now. I'm an educator, trainer, and a project manager for different NGOs all around Europe. I will be your host and I will go with you through the journey of today in this podcast focused on learning, education, and well-being. As usual, on this third episode, we're gonna have an international guest. But before to start, music. So here we're back, and it's now time to introduce the international guest of today for this third episode of Learn Well podcast. Today we're gonna have with us Dita Mozge from Latvia. I will not tell much more about her because I want to ask her to introduce herself and tell a bit more about herself. So Dita, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, hello. I am Dita. As Tony said, I'm Latvian. I come from Latvia. I have been working in non-formal education for I think 5 years now, since 2014, so 6. Me and Tony, we went together for a broad experience in European Solidarity Corps in Croatia. So I have been in Croatia for 5 years, and now I am living in Germany for half a year, more than half a year. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I'm very confused about timings because it seems that it's just one big thing. I'm just moving around, as I guess a lot of people who are watching this podcast or listening to it are an international crowd, very into Erasmus Plus, and this is our life. We move around. So sometimes it's very hard to put together where we have been and when we have been there. So yeah, I am by formal education. I am graphic designer. So I attended university in graphic design and multimedia communication. And then in 2013, I actually decided that I needed change in my life, and I went for my first training course under Erasmus Plus. And somehow since then, I found a passion for it. So since then it started to roll. I went for training courses and youth exchanges and my own EBS experiences, and found myself here now when I'm a trainer, non-formal educational trainer, life coach, working in this educational field. Yeah, very recent thing that I did a bit more than a half a year ago. So since January, I actually enrolled in university again. I am now studying to become a business psychologist. And I did this step because being in the environment of Erasmus Plus, I learned a lot. And what I was lacking was this formal knowledge of this psychology side and how organizations work. So yeah, I wanted to have a background knowledge, like really knowledge of theories, because I had a lot of experience. So now and this first half a year I have been studying, and I would say I'm putting connecting the dots, I would say like that.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds pretty great. This you getting back to education, to formal education in this case, and getting back to study, to college. I think we will get back to it later on if you wish to tell us more about it. And I actually want to connect my next question to it. I would say almost directly. So what I want to ask you is, as you might know, this podcast is based and is focused on learning also. And this is what I would like to go a bit deeper with you in this sense. What does learning mean to you? What is the meaning of this word for you, and what it is learning for you?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I want to say that it's very important for us to talk in this field of education, to talk what is learning, because it's such a wide concept that we go into experiences of leading training courses or learning experiences that sometimes it gets blurry and it brings confusion into it. So for me, learning is a personal thing. So each person, it's a process. So for each person, it's a different process of learning. Versus if we would talk about what is education, and then for me, education is a system. So a system of concepts, a system of how that learning is happening. But the learning is something that happens in our brains. Like if you would look at psychology as a science, then they explain a lot about how learning happens in brain and how human beings actually learn. So for me, it's linked with this process of actually getting the knowledge and saving it in our brains, remembering it, and how it happens biologically, as well as what I think Fabri talked about in previous podcasts about this embodied learning, and Fabri and Tisha talked about quite some about this embodied learning. Like it's not enough to know, but to actually do it, we need to embody it.
Yeah, this actually brings also a lot of thinking and reasoning to me as well, on how actually this concept is, the concept of learning is very, very subjective, and it changes a lot from person to person, and actually how each one of us learns in a completely different way.
Exactly, like this, what Fabri was saying about learning styles at some point, I think, in the podcast.
Yeah.
So each of us, we have different learning style. And for me, I can say like I learn a lot visually, and I learn a lot if I do it myself. So this is the kinesthetic part, that I learn a lot if I draw a picture of the concept. If I physically take, and almost like making constellation physically, like putting concept on a table and explaining, okay, this kiwi is a whatever I'm learning about. So to see it and to physically be able to move it around.
Yeah, and this completely different ways of learning for each individual, and how each of us learns in a different style. It's a very, very interesting topic to dig up and to learn about. And yeah, I would say we're gonna have some time to talk about it, maybe in some of the next episode of the podcast, and to dig a bit deeper on the topic. Then what I would like actually to connect directly to this point, from my point of view, is two other elements which are also part of the core of this podcast, which are education and well-being. And then my question for you is, how do you see, and if do you see a connection, or maybe only differences, this I don't know, between learning, education and well-being, if you see them connected somehow, if you see them part of a bigger picture?
Of course there is, because the purpose is similar. Huh? The purpose of learning is that we gain new skills, we gain new competences, we grow as people. That would be for me, that's my, like, why I learn. So personal commitment to learning. And then in education, obviously, how I perceive education, the purpose of education is to give new skills, to develop people, and to help develop people or support people in their growth. So they are, for me, they go hand in hand. And in our field, which would be Erasmus Plus or these kind of self-development trainings, it's we are doing education in the core. We are doing non-formal education. It's a system. It's a as much as I did not like formal education when I was growing up, now I'm when I think about it, I cannot escape from it. Like it's there.
And do you see actually a connection between these elements and self-well-being and being at once with self, like being in a status of peace, I would say?
Yeah, like I can tell you on my personal example, as I got into education not because I wanted to educate, but because I wanted to learn. And why I wanted to learn, my aim of exactly this personal self-development was that I was suffering depression. And for me, like, not everybody goes through this, but my journey through depression was through self-development. So it was, for me, for sure, education contributed so much. This non-formal education contributed so much in my personal well-being. Discovering things about myself, which, yeah, maybe it's not in formal education, the path that schools take, but in non-formal education, I find it very, like one of the biggest pluses, what is happening in nowadays in Erasmus Plus, that people get to discover what's inside of them and how they see the things and how they see the issues and maybe how they want to solve their own issues. So it's connected a lot, yeah, with well-being, and there's a great power. This education has a great power to actually raise the life happiness, like happiness and well-being of people.
Yeah, and once again, actually, this leads me to directly to the next question, which I wanted to ask you, and it's directly connected to your personal experience. Since you have collected quite some, so I would like to ask you to tell us a bit more about what you've done in the field of education and yeah, how it's been for you.
My personal experience in the field of education obviously started when I was very small in the formal education. And actually, I think I was quite lucky because my parents decided to put me in a very specific school called Waldorf School, and the approach there was human-based. And I was raised in this environment of education is for humans. And then after that, I went into very prestigious or very high-rated gymnasium, which was totally formal. They did not care about people, as majority of our educational instances. And then I lost the interest for education. And then when I started to go back, like many years have passed, and I've discovered non-formal education within Erasmus Plus, and I started to go to training courses, and I started to work with people. I found that I'm not alone like that. So working with people, I saw that a lot of people have such a weird concepts of what is education, and that education is something painful where I need to learn things that are irrelevant to my being and irrelevant to what is happening to me as a human, that actually inspired me to go further and discover. Like, I'm now hesitated to go that direction, but for me personally, the direction of education was very selfish. I went in there to discover myself and to help myself in the core. But there was one twist when I was actually coordinating some groups of volunteers, and then I got my first long-term volunteers that I was supposed to coordinate for a year. And I went in with this attitude of like, I will support not that I will support the people, but that we have an aim to do and we have the goal. And it turned out that working with people in education it's not about aims, at least I saw it. It's about the teamwork. It's about each individual person and knowing where they fit into the system. So where they fit as an individual. As the same as when I came in with my own aim, they each had their own aim, So I ended up with these 5 people. I ended up talking a lot with them about what they want to do, what they want to learn, what they want to get out of it. And this is something that I lacked in my education in university when I first went there. That there was no conversation about that. So formal education, I did not receive this kind of thing. Okay, I'm not sure if I went into direction.
Yeah, you got it, and yeah, it's actually pretty interesting, and yeah, it seems you got a lot of experience on the field, and there is one last thing actually that got me very curious, and it's about your will and you starting again studying in formal education, and as far as I got, correct me if I'm saying something wrong, that you started again studying in college, and you moved, let's say, focused on psychology and business, and I see this also very much related to what you mentioned about this selfishness behind the learning that you have experienced, and I see it also very connected to well-being. So yeah, this got me very curious. My question then would be, would you like to tell us a bit more about this?
Sure. Yeah. So my path went a bit. Well, I encountered an obstacle in my career path, or however you want to say. I left my previous organization, and I found myself being on the ground zero again. As I started 5 years ago, I was again there. So, and then I was reflecting of what I want to do, because I got so many things out of my previous experience, and I knew so many things what to do. And then I found myself in front of my CV, that actually I have formal education of graphic design. I have a couple of training courses, but I did not invest my time in my own qualifications, let's say like that. So this was the first hint. I was like, okay, I need a qualification. And and somehow I started to look where to go to study and what could I do and what to do with my life. And I just stumbled upon this course. It's Latvian university. They're doing e-studies, so I can be in Germany and I can still take the course. My now this half a year that I spent, now the first half a year, it's really, I just sit down on my computer, I open it, I do the tests, I have quite some exams and things. What I'm doing, what I'm realizing through this journey is that I'm really connecting dots. I'm really connecting dots of what I gained working in organization, and seeing it in the, let's say, real life with what theory is brought to me via formal education, and how it's also done. It's done quite interestingly, and I'm not used to it anymore since I went to uni a long time ago. So it's very selfish. It's very selfish, but I don't see it as bad. Selfish is not always bad. We need to take care of ourselves first, right?
Yeah, and actually, this is again pretty much connected with learning and self-well-being, as far as I see it, yeah. And this selfishness that you've been mentioning is as I see it, is taking care of yourself. And it's super interesting to me to see how actually, even if you've got quite some experience on your back now, this wheel of jumping back in the learning and putting yourself on the field again to get new skills, to get new knowledge, to get new competences. And as far as I got, once again, correct me if I'm wrong, like this also brings to you some sort of peace. And again, like it increases, it seemed to me, like your self-well-being.
You got it right. Like it brings it's a concept that we have been talking about quite some in the at least I have been talking with my colleagues quite some in the lifelong learning, right? The learning does not stop when we are 23, when we finish masters, but the learning continues. And I find my personal experience that I'm so curious about things. Like when I was in my early 20s doing uni stuff, I was like, I just need to get through it, and I really did not go into that subject that deep how I'm doing it now. And I had exams a couple of weeks ago, and my partner was seeing me. I was so stressed. I was not sleeping, doing my exams. And he was like, why the fuck are you doing this to yourself? And I'm like, I'm enjoying, I'm enjoying learning and like discovering things and allowing myself to be wrong if it's wrong. But like, no, like who knows me? I'm quite perfectionist, and I don't like to make mistakes, and so I have good grades, but it's not the important part. Like I'm putting myself through some suffering with a joy, like why not?
Yeah, great. It is indeed. And yeah, so I would like to ask you, it's not really asking, but last thing, like, is there anything else that you would like to add, since we still have a few more minutes to go, like something that you would like to add to our discussion of today?
Yeah, I want to say which this is an insight that came to me also now looking at what is happening in the world, starting with COVID, with situation in America. What I see is quite some lack of accountability, and this for me is very linked with learning as well, that we are responsible for our own learning, of our own way through things. Nobody else will come and teach us. There is also, we who are educators, it's not our jobs to go and teach people, to give them the to force the knowledge into them, So yeah, I would say if I would say one thing that would boost the learning is to be accountable of what you want, what is the goal, where you want to go with this learning, and be picky, because we also have seen how much of content is out there now in Facebook, how many free courses you can take online. It's crazy. So pick something, do it, be intentional, take accountability for your own learning.
Well, yeah, I can only agree on that, to be honest, like from my personal perspective, obviously. And yeah. It's for me, and to me, this is a very, very important part of the learning, the self-accountability of actions taken, and actually owning the responsibility for what's been done. And yeah, with this, I would like to thank you, Dita, for being with us today. And yeah, let's see, maybe in the future we're gonna have another opportunity for updating ourselves on a interview 2.0 on Learn Well podcast. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching this third episode of the Learn Well podcast, and keep tuned for the next appointment, which will come on our channels next week.